Another day which means more backstage drama and dispute in AEW. This time we've got an update between AEW Women's World Champion Thunder Rosa and Dr. Britt Baker, DMD. We've also got an update on the new leadership structure involving talent in the absence of Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. MJF, we got an update on his backstage reputation and has he signed an AEW contract extension. Tony Khan comments on Orange Cassidy's recent title victory and just how much was Kurt Angle asking for to wrestle 10 matches for All Elite Wrestling. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling. So let's start off talking about drama, because there's always some at the moment in AEW, whether it's the Elite and CM Punk, whether it's CM Punk getting a buyout of his contract, whether it's Ace Steel getting fired, whether it's Sammy Guevara and Andrade, Sammy Guevara and Eddie Kingston, Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker. There is always so much going on backstage in AEW. And AEW's backstage area seemingly has just as much drama in the wrestling ring and as backstage going on. And now we have an update on two members of the women's division. Now, certainly at the moment, again, a lot of the focus on the backstage drama in AEW is about this ongoing CM Punk situation. But Wade Keller from PW Torch has given an update on another source of drama, and that is the ongoing heat between Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa, saying in a recent audio show, quote, "The Thunder Rosa Britt Baker thing is not solved," end quote. Now, recent reports had suggested that Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker had heat for well over a year, and that Jamie Hayter had also developed heat with Rosa. There have also been reports of a locker room divided in its opinion of the AEW Women's World Champion, who is currently sidelined with an injury. That has also led to Thunder Rosa's injury's legitimacy being questioned. She's since come out on Busted Open Radio last week and disputed all of that going on. A bit of a rant, it must be said, pushing back on some of her doubters and disputers. And when it comes to this heat with Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker, I remember watching their Women's World Championship match at Revolution earlier this year, and I remember watching it at St. Patrick's Day Slam when Thunder Rosa won the AEW Women's World Championship. And you know, when you're watching it, especially if you've been watching pro wrestling long enough, if you've got a sort of a tuned eye, not to say, oh, I'm saying I'm an expert, but when you've been watching it long enough for the majority of your life, you can see when a match is getting a bit stiff, and you go, that feels like there is not a lot of cooperation going on there. And I recall several points in that match, and it was a steel cage match, and obviously it was brutal, it was violent, but there were points whereby, you know, the scoop slam for like a Michinoku driver or Thunder driver, her finishing move, Thunder Rosa, didn't feel particularly smooth, and some of the forearms felt particularly stiff, and not work stiff, but like, I'm leaving a bit on you as a receipt stiff. And again, we've heard all of these rumors about Thunder Rosa having heat backstage. I recall, and again, this was before these reports even happened, I recall, if you go back and watch Thunder Rosa's first promo after she won the AEW Women's World Championship, it was on Dynamite, it was with Vicky Guerrero, ironically, and Nyla Rose. And Thunder Rosa's out of an interview with Tony Schiavone, and it must be said, the booking of this was terrible. You've just had this top female star in your company win the championship after such a long chase, and you're going to do an interview on the ramp and she's going to be interrupted. It was so badly booked. But she's doing the interview with Tony Schiavone, and out comes Vicky Guerrero, and Vicky Guerrero's doing her promo, she's doing her lines, it felt like, and then suddenly Thunder Rosa just starts stepping all over, just starts interrupting, and then you can see Vicky Guerrero starts pushing back, and you can tell again when something is being improv'd as opposed to scripted and opposed to worked out ahead of time, and it felt like they just felt like a mess. And it wasn't the first time I saw that with Thunder Rosa. Now, I'm not going to sit here because I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, Thunder Rosa goes into business for herself, but I just felt like that seemed odd. That felt a little bit weird. And again, all of this encompasses, all of this heat and all of this backstage dispute going on in AEW, again, it's funny because whenever you bring this up, you get those people that will say, well, backstage disputes happen in pro wrestling, and they do. They do, and people will point out examples of them happening in WWE. They'll say, well, you know, Jericho versus Brock Lesnar, or Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, or Alberto Del Rio slapping an employee in the face, or this, that, and the other. People, they get in backstage arguments in WWE. It happens, and that's true. That's fair. Backstage arguments and disagreements happen all the time in pro wrestling. It's such an ego-driven business. However, the issue with the AEW backstage tension is all of this is happening in the space of, 12 months? That's the problem there. And as I've said a million times before, the buck ultimately, not intended, the buck does stop with Tony Khan in that instance. He has to get a hold of his locker room. And on top of that, the buck stops with whoever is this talent relations or executive team, because I do sympathize to an extent with Tony Khan because he can't control it all. He does have so much going on. He is running the business side of AEW in addition to being the director of football at Fulham, in addition to having a role with the Jacksonville Jaguars, in addition to having roles in his other businesses, in addition to trying to find a TV deal for Ring of Honor and a touring deal for Ring of Honor as well. There's lots of different things going on there. That's why it's important to delegate. That's why it's important to have an executive leadership team, a talent relations team that clearly for the last 12 months or 18 months in AEW have not been doing their job, and it's got completely out of control, and it's spilled over into several different situations, whether it is CM Punk and the Elite, or Hangman Page and CM Punk, or Colt Cabana and CM Punk, or Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker, or as I mentioned, Sammy Guevara and Andrade, or Sammy Guevara and Eddie Kingston, or Santana and Ortiz. There are all of these different situations that we've spoken about several times here on the channel, and ultimately the buck stops with Tony Khan, but also who is controlling things in AEW, because they're out of control. Again, arguments will happen, egos are part of the business, but at the same time, you have to get a hold on it. Now, it must be said, there have been steps, by all accounts, put in place to try and resolve all of these issues and kind of quell some of the drama that's been going on in AEW, but still, it's not a good look for the company. Now, one of the steps has been senior talent stepping up in the absence of the Elite, and this is a really interesting story as well. It's not the first time we've really heard this, but certainly it is interesting. Now, speaking once again on PW Torch, Wade Keller discussed the current structure of the locker room leadership within AEW, saying veteran names like Chris Jericho, Jon Moxley, and Bryan Danielson have stepped into the leadership role in the absence of suspended executive vice presidents Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. Keller said, quote, "One thing that I am hearing from people I talk to in AEW, active wrestlers and otherwise, is that one good thing that came out of this Punk Kenny Bucks situation is that the leadership void, or the leadership slots, have been firmly filled by Chris Jericho, Jon Moxley, and Bryan Danielson. None of the three is a perfect leader, but the three collectively are stabilizing to that locker room. And I'm not going to do a long thing about the shortcomings of each of them as leaders. Like I said, not one of them is the perfect leader for this moment in time in that locker room, but all three are good leaders, and collectively they can help steer the ship. This locker room in AEW is not in disarray." Now, again, a lot of people have tried to compare AEW to WCW and the inmates running the asylum, and I understand why people would make that comparison, but AEW isn't in as much trouble financially and doesn't have as much instability, or isn't as unstable as WCW was. WCW, of course, did have money. They were losing a ton of it, and ultimately, when it became to that point, it was owned by Turner, so Turner decided to sell the entity. That's not going to be the case with AEW. AEW is actively making money. Yes, they posted a loss because of their video game investment, but apart from that, they were highly profitable, and they became profitable in their first year of existence and even throughout the pandemic, which is no mean feat. On top of that, of course, they're very financially well backed. They're going to do very well in the upcoming television negotiations. They're going to get an improved television deal, whether it's with Warner Media Discovery or not. AEW is going to get a big TV deal because pro wrestling and television rights deals are extremely profitable right now, because there are three things that draw on television. I keep saying it. It's live sport, cable news, and pro wrestling. That's what draws at the moment. Look at the ratings. And in comparison to scripted shows or scripted TV entertainment, the budget is far lower for pro wrestling. So television networks get high ratings and they don't spend as much money. So companies like WWE, like AEW, can get big television rights deals because the companies that are paying that money know it's a good return on their investment. So I have no doubt that AEW will be around for a long, long time. We're not going to see them disappear. Whether the anti-AEW fans like it or not, and they post it all on social media and say that they're dangerous, even though pro wrestling is just as dangerous in any company, and you do learn from your mistakes, AEW is going to be around for a long time. Now, frankly, I know that people like Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks have been with AEW from the start, and they were somewhat the spark that lit up AEW and were part of the reason for the company being formed in the first place. Obviously, the biggest being Tony Khan having the money, but on top of that, there was a pool of talent there that hadn't really been touched by WWE, like Kenny Omega, like the Young Bucks. Of course, Cody Rhodes had left WWE at the time, and you had Hangman Page, and then you had big free agents coming out of WWE like Chris Jericho and Jon Moxley. That was really what created and made AEW what it is today. However, you could argue that, I understand at the time why they were made EVPs. Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks and Cody Rhodes, they were made executive vice presidents of the company to ensure that they bought into AEW, because they had offers from WWE on the table at the time for a lot of money, and Tony Khan said, what can I offer them, which WWE can't? I can offer them similar amounts of money or more money, but I can also say, you can be an executive in a growing company, and 2 or 3 years' time, you'll be in an executive position. But in reality, they weren't properly qualified for that role, clearly. Now, I'm not saying Chris Jericho, Jon Moxley, and Bryan Danielson are, but as far as leaders, as far as people that have done it all in the business, as far as people that are experienced and know pro wrestling, know how companies work, and know how to have a successful locker room, you can't ask for 3 better people really there. Chris Jericho, how many locker rooms has he been in? He's been in a WCW locker room that has been divided, that has been toxic. He's been there, he's done that. He's been through iterations of WWE, of ECW. He's been in New Japan, he's been in Mexico, he's been around the world. Jon Moxley, again, has been in a successful WWE locker room, same as Bryan Danielson. They've got experience of winning world championships and being in over acts and performing on the largest stage possible. And they are leaders. They are the 3, you would probably argue, the 3 biggest stars in AEW right now. You can talk about, the Bucks and Kenny Omega, and they are draws, no doubt about that, but they're not there at the moment. You could absolutely say Jericho, Moxley, Danielson are the 3 biggest stars. They probably have the most respect out of anyone in that locker room right now. They're fairly easy to get on with. They're all different personalities, clearly, but I don't think any of them should be executive vice presidents, because I think people in that EVP role should be people that have experience in that role. Not talent, not actively working talent, because it's just been proven at this stage, hasn't it? You can't be an executive and a talent at the same time. And when I say a talent, I mean a full-time talent. Yeah, you can be an executive, you can be a part-time talent that comes back for a big match now and then, akin to, say, a Triple H or something like that. But you just can't be a full-time talent, be an executive, and have a say on the ultimate, decisions in a company. Historically, it's never worked, and it will continue not to ever work. But as far as those 3 being in leadership roles in AEW, I do think that's a good thing for the company. Now, speaking of backstage reputations and drama, MJF has not been immune to all that and more in recent months in All Elite Wrestling, but there is a new backstage update on MJF's reputation in All Elite Wrestling. Now, Maxwell Jacob Friedman, of course, made his return to AEW at the All Out pay-per-view, following 3 months off television after differences with AEW president, owner, and CEO Tony Khan over his contract. At the event, MJF won the Casino ladder match to earn himself a shot at the AEW World Championship. Now, during a recent PW Torch audio show, Wade Keller discussed the locker room environment in All Elite Wrestling and stated that things are pretty good backstage and not as bad as the headlines make it seem. In regards to MJF, Keller speculated that MJF had secretly signed an extension, but the company is not admitting it because of what they have planned in the next year or so, which is something that I have been saying several times here on the show, but we'll talk about that in a second. When mentioning that MJF is someone who could become a locker room leader, he said, quote, "The MJF thing isn't a big topic of conversation. He's back. My belief is he signed an extension, even if he's telling everybody on and off camera he didn't. I think he did. Unless someone has seen the contract, I think it's presumptuous and potentially faulty reporting to analyze for the MJF situation, as if Tony Khan made a mistake by not signing him to an extension. It's in their interest to say he didn't because they have a storyline planned for a year from now where MJF is likely going to announce he is staying at AEW. I think he got paid big money and the extension that he wanted, and Tony put whatever issues he had with how MJF handled the situation aside, gave him what he wanted, and went from there." On how Friedman handles himself outside of the ring, Keller said, quote, "And obviously MJF is getting big pops, but he's someone who obviously Tony Khan trusts putting out there in the media to do approved interviews. MJF is very articulate and a student of the game, and is someone who, when he's happy with his contract, is tight with Tony and they get along. So he's somebody who, because of his prominence right now with the TV time he gets and how young he is and the crowd reactions, he's got some things working for him that certainly you can move him in the direction of representing the younger wrestlers wrestlers in the locker room leadership. But even with everything, with how everything went on this summer, I think MJF is going to grow into a locker room leader. I think he's going to be in AEW beyond 2023. My hunch is that's a done deal at this point. Keller concluded by bringing up MJF's backstage reputation among talent, saying, quote, "He really isn't a problem in the locker room like Sammy Guevara has been, for instance, or Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa have been. That's not him. He's actually less of a problem than the Bucks and Kenny. Kenny is more political than his reputation in terms of protecting his turf and not just being laid back and a kind of quirky guy. He's more political. MJF is ambitious but not super political. And so that works to the locker room stability too. Especially if I'm right in my speculation and my hunch and my belief that he signed a multi-year extension and just isn't saying so. Of course, MJF is currently scheduled to challenge Jon Moxley for the AEW World Championship at Full Gear on November 19. Again, if you've watched any recent MJF news stories that we've done recently, or I've spoken about on MJF here on the channel, I have said several times, like Wade Keller, my belief is that MJF has signed an extension with the company. I can't wrap my head around. I don't think it's logical that Tony Khan would put all of this money on the table for MJF and not have him sign an extension. And MJF, this is the thing, people ignore this part of the reporting, but when all of that contract stuff was going on over the summer, it was widely reported that MJF wasn't naive enough. His thought process was, I know if I'm asking for more money, if I'm asking for an improved contract, I know that I'm going to have to sign an extension. I know that's going to be the case, and I'm happy to do that. And to Wade Keller's point, it's the same point that I've been making recently, is that one, I don't think Tony Khan's stupid enough to give him money and then still have him go in a couple of years' time. I think that would be bad business. On top of that, the reason that they're saying he hasn't signed an extension is because he mentions it every week. He's been mentioning it in every single interview. The bidding war of 2024. He's saying down the line, this time next year, or come to the end of next year, there's going to be all this speculation. Is MJF going? Is MJF leaving? Is MJF going to go to WWE? What's going on? And then AEW can have a big press release, or they can do a big storyline where MJF announces, I'm staying in AEW because it's the place to be. It's my company. I helped build this place. WWE in the mud, this, that, and the other. It just makes so much sense. And it would be bad business at this stage when MJF is doing this well, where you would put this money on the table and not have him sign an extension. It would be ridiculous. And as I mentioned, MJF's going to be the next AEW World Champion. Why would you put the money on the table? Why would you make him the face of your company? He's turning into a babyface as well, only for him to leave and go to WWE in a couple of years' time. Or 18 months' time, however long it may be. That just doesn't, to me, make any sense. And as I mentioned, the reporting indicated earlier this summer that MJF was more than willing to extend his stay in AEW. So I think that's exactly what he's going to do. And I think that's exactly what he's done. And people were saying, well, he's saying to everyone that he hasn't. MJF works everyone. He disappeared for 3 months. His promo on Dynamite was a work. That's what he does. He works people close to him. He keeps things very close to the vest like that. And it will be no different. Speaking of Tony Khan, he recently said that Orange Cassidy's title victory, the All-Atlantic title victory, was very memorable. In an interview with Sports Illustrated, Tony Khan said, quote, "That's a great rivalry, and the most recent chapter is the most heated. The title change and the orange confetti dropping was a memorable end to our international debut in Canada, and it also sets up an exciting match between the Best Friends and Death Triangle." Of course, that was last week. Penta and Phoenix are coming off huge nights at Triple Mania in Mexico, where they each turned in amazing performances. As far as memorable, look, I said before, Orange Cassidy and Pac have unbelievable chemistry in the ring. There's no doubt about that. Going back to their first match at Revolution in 2020, they nearly stole the show if it wasn't for that tag team match involving the Bucks, Omega, and Hangman. So I think it was a fantastic match, and it certainly, to their credit, for a championship that I don't think is all that meaningful in the All-Atlantic Championship, I felt that they did their very best, certainly, to make it feel somewhat meaningful with that match. And it was an excellent match and a great main event. As far as it being memorable, I guess it's memorable because, the way they ended the show, and it's Orange Cassidy's first title victory, but it's not up there with, other title changes. But I suppose I understand what Tony Khan is trying to say there. Finally, Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle has stated numerous times he's had at least 2 offers to wrestle in All Elite Wrestling. And this is a couple of years ago now. But he's actually now revealed his asking price for a deal with All Elite Wrestling. Now, He retired from in-ring competition in 2019, of course, following his retirement match against Baron Corbin at WrestleMania 35. In the past, he's mentioned he turned down offers from AEW, with the proposed deals being, at first, a one-match come in, have one match and disappear, but the next one was actually more significant than that, a 10-match agreement. Speaking on the latest edition of the Kurt Angle Show, the Olympic gold medalist revealed he wanted to be paid $300,000 per match for a total of $3 million. When asked if he would ever return to the ring again, Angle said, quote, "Well, to even consider coming back, it's going to have to be a substantial amount of money. I do remember Tony Khan wanted me to come in and wrestle for him. This was like 4 years ago, and I said for 10 matches, I want $3 million. Angle laughed following this before being interrupted by his wife Giovanna, who said he'll never wrestle again. It must be said, Kurt Angle underwent double knee replacement surgery in May, so the likelihood of him wrestling anytime soon seems unlikely. In addition to all of his neck issues, I have really no interest in seeing Kurt Angle return to the ring, given all of his physical issues. I think the reason why this was proposed to him, because again, I think this was proposed to him in, I think it was late 2019 or maybe sort of early 2020. Remember, he was still with WWE as a producer at that point. So it might have been after he got released in April of 2020. It was around that period of time. And the pitch was made to him was basically, we know you ended your career in WWE. We know you had that WrestleMania retirement match, but that wasn't the retirement you wanted. That wasn't the ending that you wanted. That wasn't the ending you went back to WWE for. That wasn't wrestling John Cena at WrestleMania. You had a 5-minute match against Baron Corbin, which was the penultimate match on the card, and nobody cared. Come into AEW, we'll give you the send-off the right way. And he said no, or he said he wanted this amount of money. And to be honest, for AEW, $3 million for 10 Kurt Angle matches, it just wouldn't have been worth it. It wouldn't have been worth it at that stage. It wouldn't have been in the budget, I don't think, as well. Kurt Angle is fantastic. If this was 2005, 2006, and you're getting a Kurt Angle that is still somewhat in his prime. I mean, even then he'd had a couple of neck surgeries and was still pretty bad. After that, after the 2003 neck surgery, he was really never the same, even though he had those great matches against Shawn Michaels and Brock Lesnar, etc. But he still wasn't the same. But you could argue, $3 million for 10 matches at that point is, even then, considering money back then, you would say that's a lot of money. But for Kurt Angle in his 50s, it wasn't worth it with his health issues. Look, could he come back and wrestle one match, a proper last match? I don't know. I don't know if I have any interest in really seeing it at this point. Kurt Angle, he's in actually fantastic shape physically, but it's because he has to be. His neck is so messed up. His arms are completely atrophied at this point. His knees, I'm so glad he got those replaced because he was walking with bent knees the entire his last WWE run. I just want at this stage Kurt Angle to be healthy. He's been through so much. I just want him to be healthy and not have to step in the ring again. So there you go, guys. That's the latest AEW news for you. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe bottom right hand corner. Let me know your thoughts on today's AEW news stories in the comment section below. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.